Hello and welcome to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. I'm your host, Leon Wolf, and we're delighted that you have joined us tonight. Today is Thursday, April the 16th of 2015, and we are delighted, as always, to be joined by a full panel of our regular co-hosts, or at least we believe is a full panel. We'll get to that in a second. First of all, I want to welcome everybody who's our normal contributor. Scott Lincicome of the Cato Institute, glad that you are with us as always. Neal of the Federalist, glad to have him here. Jeff Blehar of the Ashe Spade's Decision Desk, we're glad to have him here as always. And we're hopeful that Bill will join to the show. That would be probably his own mother, no one else. Our guest panelist for tonight is Ashe Schow of the Washington Examiner, and we're delighted that she has joined us. Hello?
I don't know. Feed messed up for anyone else?
Back?
You're back.
Okay, sorry guys. Let's jump right into the news here. We're having internet issues, and we'll try to work through those as best we can tonight with the lag and everything else. But we ask that you bear with us patiently. Our first question tonight is going to go to Ashe. Our normal practice, go to the guest host, and we're going to talk about the new Hillary campaign that was launched.
Yeah, I'm going to pick this up.
More or less a low media profile in the sense of not actually talking to the media. We'll talk about how the media is kind of following her around in another minute. But how would you grade how Hillary has done with her rollout so far?
Pretty poorly. You know, she's already told multiple lies since she's rolled out. I mean, first she came to Iowa, and it turns out that it wasn't everyday Iowans that were set up. There was actually, they bussed some people in that were Democratic staffers. They lied about, you know, who filmed her whole like campaign ad. They were saying that, oh, it was all done in-house, but apparently there was some outside group for it. And it's just, you know, kind of one mistake after another. She didn't tip at Chipotle. Today she parked in a handicap spot, which doesn't go well for her either way, because it's either, oh, she's old and she's in a handicap spot, or, you know, that's a really jerkish thing to do, to park in the handicap spot. So it hasn't been the smoothest rolled out.
Hey,
but
it's not jerkish to park in the handicap spot if you're actually handicapped. I'm just saying.
Right, exactly. But that feeds into the whole thing of, you know, her being nearly 70. But
they don't like us to mention Hillary's walker. Is it a bad
exoskeleton?
Yes. Is it a bad thing not to chip at Chipotle? I understand the thing about the handicap parking spot. Have I been doing it wrong this whole time? Are you supposed to tip the people who take your money at Chipotle? I don't know.
No, I don't think you're supposed to, but I guess if you were a presidential candidate, I guess maybe just some advice for all of you. If you see a tip jar, put something in it so that you don't have articles written about how you don't tip. It's just one very simple thing to avoid, I guess.
All right. Neal, let's go to you next. How long do you think Hillary can essentially shut the media out, at least in terms of answering direct questions from the media before they start complaining? Or do you think she can continue it indefinitely?
Oh, I think she can keep them at arm's length for as long as she wants to. You know, I really don't think that she's going to get a complete free pass this go around. I think that at some point they are going to try to start asking some substantive questions, and they're going to get frustrated if they are prevented from getting access to her. But ultimately, they'll fall in line. They'll behave as she wants them to behave. And they'll be happy to cooperate in exchange for access. That's really what it's going to come down to. Is I think if they play nicely with Hillary, then they'll be able to, you know, take pictures of Hillary and be around Hillary and chase Hillary's van or whatever mode of transport she happens to be using at the time. Run behind her on foot.
Right, you see how many times that the media, like, anytime she tweets something, they're like, oh, she tweeted, and there's just everybody writes an article based on whatever she tweeted.
Innovative and new and spontaneous.
I literally earlier today, I likened the media's coverage of Hillary Clinton right now to like that boring sitcom that was on NBC on Thursday night during the 90s, and nobody liked, but we all just watched it because it came in between Seinfeld and Friends, and it was like, what the heck else are you going to do on a Thursday night? Like Wings. Remember Wings, or Caroline in the City, or the
Wings is great.
The single guy. Remember the single guy? All right. I'm just saying that, like, the media has no idea what to do. They have to write these stories because it's Hillary. And they're coming up, the headline, the top story on Politico today was, "Meet the man who made Hillary Clinton's burrito bowl at Chipotle." What does that say about how utterly bankrupt they are for ideas and substantive stories? It's just hilarious and pathetic.
Well, I get what everybody's saying. On the other hand, I think that there's going to come a point where the tipping point is going to be reached. I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I mean, I was watching Morning Joe this morning, and they showed that hilarious video. For those who haven't seen it, look it up on YouTube. Reporters chasing after Hillary. The hilarious video, I hope everyone's seen it, of the Hillary van driving by, and like 50 reporters like running around the side of the building to get to Hillary, and everyone, including Mika on Morning Joe, was just making fun of the way that the press is treating Hillary. But next question I want to ask is going to go to Scott. You know, if you think back to 2008, the wheels came off pretty dramatically for Hillary in 2008 in Iowa. She rubbed a lot of Democrat activists the wrong way. She was seen as being aloof, someone who didn't take the state seriously. What do you think about her chances of carrying the state in general? You think it's going to go Democratic again, or you think it's going to flip back to 2000, 2004 GOP in the general?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that that if she, well, I mean, if she's running uncontested, she's clearly going to take care of the Democratic nomination in Iowa. You know, whether she carries the state as the nominee, you know, it just depends. Really, I think, not to be completely trite, but on who the Republican nominee is. You know, it seems that in 2008, her campaign really struggled when they started having weakness and showing weakness. You know, they started fighting. There was a lot of infighting, a lot of hilarious backstabbing, and I have no doubt that would occur again if we see some public chinks in the armor. Until then, though, it seems quite clear so far, at least, that the media are going to have no problem running cover for her and you know, dodging Bosnian sniper fire and so forth until November 2016.
So, Bill, we're glad you're here and that you've joined us. Next question goes to you. The Clinton Foundation has announced that during the campaign it's going to stop accepting donations from all foreign countries except for Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, Norway, Germany, and Netherlands, I think. All ostensible allies of the United States, but nonetheless, even if they're allies of the United States, they definitely have their own specific interests that sometimes diverge from the United States in particular ways, in particular foreign policy fights. I mean, is this going to be enough of a safeguard? I mean, is this going to be a live campaign issue, this continuing acceptance of the Clinton Foundation of gifts? Will Republicans be able to wedge a foot in the door with this ongoing problem that she has with the Clinton Foundation?
Yes, and here's how you do it. You keep talking about how they took money from Qatar and from Middle East regimes, and you know, you look at all of these countries that they maintained and they kept on the list. I say Republicans hit her for only accepting money from white countries. I think we drive a wedge by making this all about identity politics. You know, is India not an ally? Are we going to stop taking Indian money? India is, you know, my cousin actually, full disclosure, my cousin worked for the Clinton Foundation in India. They do a ton of stuff there, and it seems kind of odd in these days that we are not going to jump all over the identity politics. And really start cracking the Dem coalition by talking about how problematic it is that only white money is good in terms of the Clintonites' Manhattan upkeep.
Bill, the problem is we can't play this game better than they can play this game, all right? You start saying, oh, why aren't you taking Indians' money? Then they're going to say, hey, we take colored people's money. We take the Saudis' money. We take the money from the Middle Easterners. Aren't they a minority now? And we'll say, no, they're Caucasian. They have to check that box when they take their SATs.
Yeah, no, but that's the
But they'll
thing.
beat us every time.
Yeah, but then they say, oh, we're taking all this Middle Eastern money, and you're going to say, wait, that's not buying access to people of dubious origin? Congrats.
This is kind of
the Clinton Foundation and Osama bin Laden share some of the same donors. Like, then, we immediately parlay that into there. Oh, my gosh, Neal, your jacket is fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Can we step back and just, take a look at that thing?
No.
Good job.
Continue making a very good point, Bill, because I agree with you.
We marveled at Neal's jacket while you were on the elliptical there, Bill. So.
Oh, I have to do that for my. I'm being considered for life insurance right now, so I wanted there to be proof that I do something healthy. So I get proof for policy.
I don't know if this show is considered admissible proof in court, if anything.
We'll talk about all the cigarettes and all the drinking. That's what they
That's
ask
what I'm
us.
saying. If they bring that up, then they have to bring up that I used an elliptical for 15 minutes today.
Exactly. All right, Jeff. So speaking of things that Democrats do better than we do, there was an article, I believe, in the Washington Examiner the other day talking about at least the GOP indicates that it has learned some things from the debacle of 2012 when the Democrats had a humongous advantage over the GOP, not only in terms of their tech and their data operation, but also in terms of their opposition research and so on and so forth. And, you have these groups now like America Rising and have dedicated 100 staff members to Hillary Oppo research. GOP's reportedly overhauled their data collection operation. How much, if any, do you think the Dems are going to have a tech advantage over the GOP this time around as compared to 2012?
Well, I think they're going to have a tech advantage for the simple reason that they were there first, and they simply have to refine on their revolution. They don't have to come up with a new revolution of their own. And, of course, the other major question is what will the eventual Republican nominees get out the vote and data mining outfit look like? It could look like something very clever, like the people who were working, say, for David Brott in Virginia when he overturned Eric Cantor in that congressional race. It was a very smart, very micro-targeted race, and they did a good job getting out voters. Or it could look like the massive cluster F that was Project Orca, which we all remember, Zach Moffett and his people. Again, this is a topic that seemingly comes up every other week on these various shows that people talk about this. And I try to sort of hold out hope. I say, well, you can't just assume that people are incapable of learning from their mistakes. So maybe these guys who seem to be being hired by all the mainstream media campaigns, all of the Bush, Walker, Rubio, all these guys that failed with Romney seem to be getting hired onto the same sorts of jobs in the GOP primary campaigns, which I have to say does not give me a lot of hope. It makes me kind of shudder with fear. But then again, on the other hand, you want to say maybe they're capable of learning from their mistakes. I'm not so sure yet. The one thing I don't think we're going to have a problem with is opposition research. We have really upped our game on that. And I know some people who do this, both on campaigns and for the National Party. We're good at that now. But opposition research is a much different proposition from micro-targeting voters and maintaining voter contact. So I just don't know how that's going to turn out yet.
Yeah, but if the tech isn't there, especially with Rubio hiring the Orca guy, with Jeb Bush had the guy that instantly they were like, look at his past tweets, this is horrible. He was fired 2 days after he was hired. If they keep doing dumb stuff like that, I'm not sure they are learning anything.
Okay, well, that is stupid in its own way. And what were you going to say, Leon? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just going to say the Jed's mistake is you can't hire anyone who's been on Twitter. I mean, period. I mean, listen, anyone who's been on Twitter has said things that have been offensive at some point. I mean, that's just the reality. And we talked about Liz Mayer for some time. It's not just that. Anybody who has any kind of record these days is going to present a problem. But anyway, go ahead, Jeff. What were you going to say?
I was actually going to say something similar to that, and I was also going to just point out that there is a difference. I think one of the things that the campaigns have difficulty with, especially the ones that aren't young, Rand Paul's campaign, I don't think you'd catch them making this mistake because they understand news cycles. They understand when a stink like this comes up, they'll just buckle down, and they've dealt with some really shady characters, frankly, and they've weathered the storm simply because they know not to buckle under. But Walker got flustered by Liz Mayer. The Jeb Bush example that you just cited, some of these older school campaigns do not understand the ephemeral nature of internet outrage. And I still have this belief that if they learn to just shut up and ignore the immediate outcries, give it 4 days, it would all just flow over them like it was water. But instead they panic, and then they fire people, and then that sets a really bad precedent.
So, Ash, let's go back to you. There was what I thought kind of an amazing article in Politico the other day. And Hillary has kind of decided to try to pick up on a lot of the same notes that Obama hit on in 2008, some of the same notes Elizabeth Warren has been hitting on since then, and she's attacked Wall Street early and often in kind of the opening days of her campaign. And there's this great article in Politico, one of their long-form articles, where it just went down and they asked all these hedge fund managers, these top Wall Street people, and they're like, we understand Hillary doesn't mean it, we're going to still give a ton of money to her campaign. And it was incredible, and I think that this is one of the biggest disconnects that exists in American politics, that the American people don't understand how in the Democrats' pocket Wall Street really is. And you know, whoever it is that's talking a big game, whether it's Obama or whether it's Elizabeth Warren, they're the ones who get all the Wall Street money. They're the ones who in the final analysis, Obama has done nothing to curb the abuses of Wall Street. He's done nothing to prosecute a lot of the abuses that he's brought up. Will there be any point in this campaign season where somebody on the Republican side is going to have, you know, the balls to stand up and say, look, if you want to know who Wall Street is with, it's with the Democrats?
Well, that assumes that the Republicans would have balls to say anything, and it doesn't really matter. It just comes right back on them that you're bought and paid for by Wall Street. I mean, if you say, well, they are too, it never really works. I mean, it's really disturbing considering how much money Wall Street does give to the Democrats.
But it's a matter of record. The last two campaigns, it's been about 2-1 for the Democrats over the Republicans for the major Wall Street donors.
Well, then the right-leaning media's got to get that out there a whole lot more than they have and they have in the past. I think it'll come out this time because we know that the candidates are. I mean, I could see Rand Paul and Ted Cruz probably talking about that more, but I mean, it's got to get in the news.
All right, Neal. So Heather Wilhelm, who's been a frequent panelist on this show, one of our favorite writers, had a great article today about the weirdness of the Hillary campaign so far. And I think if I had to pick one word to describe Hillary's opening effort, it would be weird. And this is what she says. I'm going to quote rather extensively, and I apologize for that here. She says, look, so far the Hillary show has been consistently hilarious, complete with a bizarre RoboCop-style, bulletproof, Secret Service-driven, casual road trip van, a van named oddly Scooby, even though the actual van in the show was named the Mystery Machine, not the dog. And what may have been the weirdest Ohio Chipotle visit ever, which we've already talked about. In short, Hillary wore sunglasses inside like she was some kind of Vegas mobster. She didn't talk to anyone. And then the New York Times ran a full scientific microanalysis of the nutrition content of her order. Look, Hillary Clinton is just not ordinary people, and she never has been. And moreover, she does not relate to ordinary people well, and we've seen this time and time again. Can she win the general election without that ability to connect with average, ordinary folks?
Absolutely, she can. I think if you remember back to the 2008 campaign, Barack Obama got up in an attempt to connect with the concerns of regular voters. He asked if anybody had seen the price of arugula lately. You know, it's that sort of insulation. It doesn't really hold these Democrats back. Now, it would be, you know, a source of endless jokes on the late night talk shows and on SNL if a Republican got up there and revealed, and it was for Mitt Romney. You know, Mitt Romney was this rich guy who didn't know what real people, you know, how real people lived. But Hillary, they'll sweep that under the rug. They'll cover for her. I mean, remember too that Hillary Clinton went from the Arkansas governor's mansion to the White House to immediately a Senate seat in New York, and after that she ran for president. She lost. She failed because she has no real accomplishments to her name that haven't derived from her husband's infidelity. And so she really hasn't been a normal person for more than 20 years. You know, there's the thing about her not having driven since '96, but she is not normal. She's a multimillionaire. She's a globe-trotting multimillionaire. The wife of a former president. a presidential aspirant herself, and she's been walking the halls of power for decades. She's not normal. I happen to think politicians shouldn't try to be normal if they're not. I think they should just be themselves to, as great an extent as they possibly can be. But in Hillary's case, it could be slightly off-putting.
Well, and I think that, look, I mean, obviously, neither Bill Clinton nor George W. Bush were normal people, but they had the ability to relate to normal people. I mean, look, obviously, none of us are going to have the upbringing that either of those two have, right. But they had that ability, and I think to me, the answer, well, gosh, that. What's that?
Bill has that. Bill Clinton.
Exactly. Bill Clinton has that. George W. Bush had it. And Obama, although he couldn't relate to ordinary people, he could inspire ordinary people, which I think that Hillary may lack that ability. And to me, the idea that the media is going to cover for her, the media is going to do this. I mean, look, Democrats lose presidential elections, and it happens for a reason. I think that this could become a potential issue that could trip her up in the national campaign. Let's move on a little.
Wait. Did you see the article Policy Mike, or Mike News, formerly Policy Mike, had like 10 accomplishments that Hillary Clinton has that were in no way due to her husband? The fact that they actually needed to write that article, and some of these accomplishments were just complete BS. It was like her Grammy that she won for that spoken word album, and then one of them was the whole, she's traveled more than any other Secretary of State. She's logged more miles. It's a great accomplishment, but again, all of these stem back that she wouldn't have been able to do any of these things had Bill hadn't been a dame.
Right. You asked that question on Twitter, and you don't get a response. You don't get an answer from people.
Guys, she's actually accomplished great things. I mean, think about the war in Iraq. She did a great job supporting that entire program. So I think she should run on that. I started the war in Iraq, and I would have won it too if it weren't for that. That would be fun. I would like that. Yeah. But I mean, Hillary. The other thing is you have to look back at the desperation move she made in 2008 to try to relate to blue-collar folks. And I think there was nothing better. And I think this will be fodder for opposition research to just constantly remind the folks what kind of playbook she was working with back in 2008. So, the press actually did mock her when she showed up at that bar in Ohio and took a shot of whiskey because she was trying to capture, the lost white blue-collar vote out there. We should actually hammer the Democrats and try to break apart the Obama coalition by constantly reminding them of the baiting that she tried to do in 2008 to show, she's pandering to you now, but once she was focused on turning out the very people Republicans get called racist for trying to turn them out. So I think that will be very important to cutting into that. And as far as stage campaign events go, I mean, it's been great to see the media actually call her out on it, but I don't expect the politician, and I don't think most ordinary people expect the politician to try to interact with normal people because it always blows up in their faces. So, of course, she's going to control the message and the press is going to run protection for her. At least that's what I thought. But the press has actually done a very good job of pointing out that these people were handpicked, that these people were, Democratic activists, Planned Parenthood volunteers, and the like. And we have to remind ourselves.
Weird.
Do you think she's going to try and cry this time?
Nah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to go back to the 2008. Yeah, crying. And guys, we have to
the extent to which she wears sunglasses inside. Am I the only one? I'm not the only one who.
Back tears.
I wore sunglasses inside like 2 weeks ago, Leon. I got no problem with that.
She does it all the time. And look, I mean, I understand certain medical conditions, cataracts, may cause people to need sunglasses inside. But Bill touched on something. I'm going to use that to segue into our next topic. Speaking of Iraq and what happened in Iraq, let's move on a little bit to some foreign affairs in this episode. And I'm going to take next question to Scott Lincicome. ISIS is on the verge right now of taking Ramadi, and if they take Ramadi, Baghdad is going to be in some very serious trouble. What is the likelihood that the end result of our 2003 invasion of Iraq is going to be that Iraq essentially is now a proxy for Iran for going forward? And if that happens, what does the 2016 candidate, whoever it is, need to say about the situation in Iraq if Baghdad falls?
Well, what can he or she say? At that point, assuming your scenario, it's an absolute cluster. If you have an Iranian proxy in Iraq, and yeah, assuming we have the culmination of this wonderful Iran deal in June, I gotta say, you don't want to just shrug your shoulders, but at that point, I mean, yeah, I'm sure that you'll have a lot of guys pounding the table and demand that they're going to reverse things. But other than a major invasion, I'm pretty unclear as to what we're going to do at that point. So your guess is as good as mine.
Scott, do you see a way out of that scenario? I mean, do you think the Iraqis have any realistic shot of turning this around and turning back the advance of ISIS, or do we just need to accept at this point that what's likely to happen is that they end up taking over the control of the government?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that I hate to downplay the atrocities going on there, and it's obviously horrible. That said, I mean, I do think that the crazies are going to make mistakes, and there was that great Atlantic article maybe a month or so ago that talked about how ISIS their plans are to invade the West, and if they do crazy things like that, there are going to be major repercussions from not only the United States but also other Western governments. So right now it looks horrible, but I don't overestimate the crazies. I'll put it that way. And so I think it's far from inevitable at this point that we're going to have a full-blown caliphate in that entire region in 2016. I mean, I think it's actually I'd be willing to put my money on the opposite.
All right, Bill. ISIS right now, among the other things that they're doing, is they're engaged in what can really only be considered and called ethnic cleansing of the Assyrians in Syria. And the Assyrians, for those who don't know, are predominantly Christian community. They're responsible for the preservation of the Aramaic language, which, of course, Jesus Christ is supposed to have spoken, and a lot of other historical and cultural things that might be lost forever if the Assyrians are permanently displaced from their current home in Syria. The world seems disinclined to do anything to stop it. Nobody in the West seems inclined to step in and say, look, we're going to do anything, much less the United States. I mean, if we don't put our foot in, and it seems like we're not going to put our foot in, nobody else will. So, I mean, I guess the question is, I mean, has the West already lost the culture war with the caliphate? I mean, if you look at this with a long view, set aside what's happening in Ramadi and Baghdad right now, and have we lost the will to fight and to preserve our cultural identity?
Well, I think that that's a little presumptive. I don't think the West counts this as their cultural identity anymore, and that's why we are so willing to overlook the plight of Christians in Lebanon. We allowed Lebanon to get completely overrun and basically just said, don't worry, we'll give you refugee status. And
sure,
that's why so many Lebanese came to the United States. But I mean, I actually see this as a problem. We don't have a vested interest there because we don't care about the Assyrians. We don't care about the Christians in the Middle East, and we have demonstrated that for decades that we don't care about it. And that's a real shame. And a president who says and who brings up the Crusades so much is not going to try to jeopardize his I guess relationship with the Middle East by going to war just to protect these Christians. However, we are going to drop everything to protect the Muslim version of Satanists in Iraq. We will protect those guys, but the Christians all over the Middle East just receive no backup. They have no clout. They have no power, even in governments within the Middle East, in places like Lebanon, which used to be a majority Christian nation. These guys have just been forced into basically being a swing vote between two different Islamist parties that they decide to coalition with in order to avoid eradication. So this is absolutely a direct consequence in Syria of failing to actually get involved. And Alana Goodman over the Free Beacon documented this very early in the Syrian civil war, that Bashar al-Assad was never really a protection, was never really the protective force behind the Christians. These guys were receiving assistance from more moderate rebels, and we did nothing to help these guys actually fight wars. So as a result, they've been completely overrun, or many of the moderate groups have, basically been co-opted by ISIS, and now we're stuck to, basically playing into Bashar al-Assad's hand, which was always to cast himself as, the helping hand to the Christian. And if you want to predict the Assyrians, well, you should send your weapons over to me, and I'll fight ISIS. It's a very tragic event right now in human history.
Bill, let me stay with you. So I guess you could excuse a lot of Americans for not understanding the importance that the role of Syria and Damascus play in Christian heritage, right? So, I mean, your average American Protestant doesn't know, their elbow from their asshole when it comes to orthodoxy. But
well, yeah, they can quote Saul of Tarsus all day, but they forgot about the whole road to Damascus. Yeah.
Right, but Damascus is the seat of like a humongous, Orthodox movement, and I guess the question is, whatever you think about America's indifference to this, why aren't Eastern European nations in particular more involved in what's going on over there in Syria right now?
Well, this is how you know that Putin is just, playing off of and using the Orthodox Church as a chess piece. He constantly claims like, oh, my social laws are totally steeped in preserving our Orthodox identity, and he claims that he's helping Bashar al-Assad get rid of his chemical weapons. But if he actually cared about the Orthodox identity, he would be doing something to help these Assyrians. And this is how you know that he is a corrupt actor who's pretty much out to help the Russian gas industry at the expense of everything else. So that is my 2 cents on this. If he I'm sorry. My wife just iced me on camera, so now I have to drink this entire thing.
All right. So let's go. While you're doing that, let me go to Jeff. Let me go to Jeff with a question.
Yeah, no, she iced me. I have to drink the entire thing.
I haven't had Smirnoff Ice since I was 13.
All right, so
like 6 years ago.
Whatever.
Right.
Now that she's on camera.
So Jeff, let's talk a little bit about the Corker-Menendez deal, which was passed out of committee on a 19-0. It has a veto-proof majority in the Senate. What do you think about Corker-Menendez? Is this actually a congressional rebuke of the Iran deal? If you look into the particulars of it, it doesn't really preserve congressional ability to maintain the sanctions. It doesn't really prohibit Obama from lifting the sanctions without congressional approval. If you look back to the original Iranian sanctions, they actually say that it's actually within the president's discretion as to when the sanctions will apply and when. Does it really constitute a congressional rebuke of the Iran deal, and what effect do you think, if any, that it will have on the shape of the Iran deal when it finally takes form and is no longer just a framework as it's being called now?
Compound question. Does it constitute a rebuke? You're damn right it constitutes a rebuke. What effect is it going to have on the shape of the final deal? It ain't going to have one lick of a shape on the final deal. The final deal is going to be determined by the vagaries of the negotiation process as it currently stands between Iran and the United States, and the ball is mostly in Iran's court. They're much better negotiators, and they know that the United States is unwilling to walk away from the table. Now, that said, I thought Corker-Menendez was a pretty strong achievement. Obama simply is rolling over. This is actually a defeat for them. They're saying, oh, well, now that we've gotten the language of the bill sanded down, we've taken out the worst provisions, we don't have to veto this anymore. So we'll accept it and we'll sign it. That's a bunch of bullshit, if you don't mind me saying so. They didn't want this bill at all, and they're mortified and humiliated by it. The only reason that they're not promising to veto it anymore is because they don't want to be, subjected to the humiliation of a veto override. When's the last time that any of us can remember in congressional history of the United States that a president has had a veto overridden? I I almost feel like it hasn't happened in my living memory. It hasn't happened since 1980, and maybe somebody else knows. But Obama won't stand for that. So he sees the writing on the wall, and he's going to accept it. Understood, it's not as strong as maybe the original Kirk-Menendez bill had been. With that said, the Congress retains a lot of room to reject the bill, or, you say, oh, they can't simply, they can't control the raising of sanctions. They can still pass new sanctions if they want. And they have the same majorities to do what they have in Corker-Menendez. They can do that. So
do you think that they have those majorities? I mean, let's say that Obama comes back with a deal that lifts sanctions and Congress doesn't like it. Do you think they had the votes to override an Obama veto specifically on that question?
Yeah, they do. I do. I would not be surprised that they do. I think they're going to lose some people who nominally signed on in this first round, the boxer types, who are very liberal and actually were secretly hoping to insert poison pills into the bill. But you're going to get 66 votes. Yeah, I think you can do that. I wouldn't bank on it. I wouldn't bet my house on it. But I think it's very plausible, and very plausible indeed. I think it only gets more plausible as this deal gets worse too, because I think the dynamic you can quite possibly see here is that Iran, who do not entirely understand the way politics works here in the United States, are going to push even harder and harder and make the deal even more unpalatable than it already currently is. And that's just going to make people even more skittish.
So, Ashe, CIA Director John Brennan, according to the Wall Street Journal, has said, went on the record yesterday saying that anybody who suggests that the current framework deal that we have seen, anybody who suggests that that current framework deal makes it easier for Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon is being wholly disingenuous. Those are his words. The kicker to that is that the CIA is supposed to be doing an ongoing analysis as to Iran's nuclear capability and how this particular framework deal might affect that nuclear capability. So in other words, what he is essentially saying to his own analysts is telling them what conclusion they should draw based on a framework that hasn't even been finalized yet, based on a deal that hasn't even been finalized yet. And I guess my question is, look, there's a precedent. In 1976, then CIA Director George Herbert Walker Bush commissioned an independent team of analysts, which he called Team B, to study the then very politically controversial question of whether the Soviet Union was basically outstripping us in terms of their military capability. And everybody assumed that this is a partisan cook job, so he said, look, we're gonna take this out of the normal chain of command. We're gonna have this independent team of analysts to study this question. Do you think that Congress should create a similar, I guess, Team B or whatever they want to call it with respect to Iran's nuclear capability? I mean, do you think that that's something that Congress should invest time and energy in doing, is to say, look, John Brennan has made up his mind as to what the conclusion is going to be with respect to Iran, almost no matter what the deal says. Should we be having somebody else take a look at this in some sort of official capacity as to what Iran's capacity for nuclear weapons is going to be?
Oh, absolutely. We should be doing anything that's going to make sure that Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons. I mean, let's be honest right here. I mean, you even call it a framework, but it's just like, a statement about a potential future idea of a framework sometime down the line. And meanwhile, Iraq or Iran is over there saying, like, yeah, guys, like, no, we're totally cool over here. We're going to keep going with what we're doing. I mean, what is it, part of the framework? They want to, like, keep their little evil mountain, their little James Bond thing going over there. I mean, of course we need somebody else to investigate this. I don't trust them, and I don't trust the director who's saying that, yeah, it's going to be fine to begin with. I mean, if they're already investigating and they're already have a conclusion, yeah, kind of need somebody else there now.
Neal, do you think that does Corker-Menendez, does that bill and its passage on the margins that it passed suggest that Democrats may be increasingly ready to balk at Obama's stepping on their territory, even if they agree with him politically? I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum this year, the number of times the Democrats should have objected to what Obama was doing. Even if they agreed with the policy, he's clearly stepped on congressional prerogatives a number of times during the course of these last few months. Do you think that this bill and the way that it was passed signals that the Democrats may be throwing up the red flag to say, listen, you've gone this far, but it really is too far, and we need to step back?
Well, I think over the next 2 years we are going to see them sort of transitioning on to the next thing. I mean, they're probably going to be looking to, cozy up with Hillary. Barack Obama is, hopeful and changeful as he was. He's old news at this point, and he got health care through, and he got all sorts of things done that the Democrats like, but he's on the way out. So it makes sense that they'd start to position themselves as sort of standing apart from the president, not necessarily just bosom buddies anymore. The better to cozy up to the next big thing, whether that's Hillary Clinton or I don't know, God, Jim Webb. Who knows at this point if it's not Hillary Clinton? So yeah, I think we may begin to see them sort of pull away there.
Do you think that there's any chance that it happens in domestic policy matters, or is this just a foreign policy thing with respect to Iran?
I think it's more likely in foreign policy. I think there are a lot of people who view, on both sides of the aisle, who view Obama's foreign policy as sort of misguided and dangerous and in need of being sort of reined in a little bit. So I do think foreign policy is more likely. I couldn't tell you how much more likely I think it is, but yeah.
All right, Scott, let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about Russia and Ukraine. If you look at kind of the rhetoric that's coming out of Russia right now, and of course we now have kind of the alarming situation of Russian warships spotted in the English Channel this week, and you look at the things that they're saying about the current conflict in Ukraine, we think the chances are that Russia is going to try to reestablish its former empire, not only in its former states, the Baltic states, but also, across Eastern Europe with respect to Poland and Bulgaria and a lot of those places. And if it has the desire to do so, what do you think about whether it has the ability to do so?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think there's any near-term risk of any of that. It seems abundantly clear that there is a desire, at least among the current Russian government, to push out a bit and to reclaim some of that old territory. That said, it's going to need to be a very slow and very deliberate process, and something that's not going to take a year or even 2 years, and it's certainly not going to be tomorrow. Whether it happens in the future, again, I don't know. There's no doubt in my mind that Putin really loves to F with the Western world and is actually excellent at it, and that there's nobody really right now who will stand up to that. And quite honestly, I don't really know how they can stand up to it, aside from starting a major conflagration that has no winners. So yeah, he's going to keep poking and prodding and messing with people. Maybe in a year or two we might see another move. But I come on, it's not like we're going to be seeing Russian tanks in Poland next week or in a month.
So, Bill, obviously, if you look at the current crisis in the Ukraine, I guess I'm not supposed to call it the Ukraine. The current crisis in Ukraine, they're in more or less a standoff right now, but the kind of chatter on the ground is that the Russians are ramping up to resume military operations. What do you think the chances are of a peaceful resolution of the current Ukrainian crisis, whether it's Ukraine giving up some significant amount of territory or of this ceasefire holding, or do you think that it can only end in a military resolution one way or the other?
I think it's absolutely going to cede territory. They are pretty much going off of, and Andrew Stiles over the Free Beacon documented that they're relying on volunteerism to try to solve this war. Not even war bonds like we had in the U.S. in World War II. They are pretty much relying on what the IRA was relying on during the Troubles. They're relying on donations from citizens of medical equipment and stuff to try to maintain at least some presence there. So I think Ukraine, without any serious backup from NATO or the West, is going to have to end up ceding a bunch of territory to Russia, because there's no way they can contend with, Putin and his forces when they get
Do you
going.
think that'll be enough?
It's,
Do you think they'll be able to kind of chop off one of their arms and hand it to Putin and say, "Here, take this arm and don't take the rest," and he'll stop there? Or do you think that in the end of the day,
no. You feed the bear, he's going to eat the entire body. He's demonstrated. I mean, this is something that no one has actually talked about. Is the demographics in Russia are terrible.
Right.
Terrible. Their birth rate is unavoidably bad. So Putin is actually not just trying to capture land; he's trying to capture population, because of he's dealing with the fact that they don't have the demographics to sustain that large territory. So Russia is facing an existential crisis in which basically they have to either partition themselves or suck up as much population as they can from the East and the former Soviet satellite states. So I don't see this conquest stopping anytime soon. I think we demonstrated, he demonstrated what he was going to do with Georgia back in 2008. He's doing it again with Ukraine. And, they'll keep doing this every few years if there's not a serious threat of force, if not the use of force against them.
I think that's completely wrong. I just want to point out geopolitically it doesn't make any sense. Putin is not going to take all of Ukraine. He doesn't want it. He couldn't hold it even if he wanted it.
No, I didn't say he was going to. Behavior is going to be curbed.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that your first impulse was correct. That Vladimir Putin, it's very obvious that he would love to have a huge chunk of eastern Ukraine, and he would most likely like to cut off Ukraine's access to the Black Sea, which is, I think, what he'll eventually end up doing. And as you said, the Ukrainians are pretty much incapable of resisting at this point. We're not offering them any support. There are no Western European support for them. It's a done deal. It's basically however hard Putin wants to push at this point, he can get it if he wants it. But Putin is absolutely not interested in annexing the entire Ukraine for two reasons. One, because they would never stay willingly within the Russian Federation, simply because the Ukrainians and the Russians don't really like one another very much, but also because Putin would much prefer to have Ukraine as a buffer state and a friendly government that basically has been co-opted, which is what the Ukraine used to be prior to the revolution with Yanukovych. That's what he's going to aim for again, except this time it's going to be a Ukraine that is obviously territorially been degraded significantly. And that's the end game. And that's probably going to come sooner rather than later at this point, the way things are going.
All right, so let's move on a little bit. Let's talk Republican side of 2016, the foreign policy arena behind. Of course, we had Hillary announcing this week, but Republicans have been doing things as well. We're going to move back to Ashe for this. Jeb Bush, of course, was in Mississippi this week talking education, which there's been a lot written and said about Bush with respect to education. And what Bush was specifically saying in Mississippi was he was touting the program that his, I guess, foundation has pioneered and has had actually a lot of success with respect to vouchers for charter schools and private schools. And I guess the question that I have for you is, look, how much is really Common Core going to be an actual liability with the people who actually vote in GOP primaries? And I think that one thing that 2008 and 2012 showed is that they are, in fact, a distinct group and have different opinions a lot of times from the people who are kind of the online opinion makers. They don't have exactly the same priorities. And people assume, look, Common Core is going to be a huge issue for Jeb in 2016. What do you think? I mean, you think the Common Core is actually going to be an actual live issue for the actual people on the ground who vote in 2016? And if so, do you think that he can overcome that liability with his strong stance in favor of vouchers and a lot of other education reforms?
I'm not sure it'll be a big issue just because, people talk all the time about how much they hate Common Core, but education just never seems to be a major issue for anybody, and it never seems to get high up there, like healthcare or foreign policy or, economy and the jobs. Like, education never gets up there. And there was a poll out recently that showed that, I don't know, when it comes to specific Common Core, people hate it. But when you just speak broadly about standardized testing, people are overwhelmingly for it. So, I mean, I don't know. Common Core has a bad name, so basically what these polls kind of show is that Jeb just has to call it by another name. And look at me, I grew up in Florida while Jeb was governor and in that education system. And, I mean, I'll just say from experience with this whole standardized test thing, there was a lot of issues with it, but very broadly speaking, one test every couple of years. If you couldn't pass that test, like, come on, people. It was like really, really basic stuff. So I don't know how big of an issue it is. I mean, if he comes at it from a point of school choice, then that would probably be a better idea. Because didn't Hillary even say something recently that was kind of, no, somebody wrote about her campaign video, right, where there was the mother who was saying, like, we're moving to a different area so that just so my daughter can go to another bigger school. But school choice isn't really something that Democrats like to talk about because government runs the schools and they just kind of try to box someone in. So I think if Jeb and anyone else does talk about school choice, they might have a bigger hand to stand on. A bigger leg to stand on, because when Democrats try to attack them on that, it just falls flat. So you're trying to keep poor and minority children in really terrible schools. I mean, you can't run on that.
Well, I mean, that's the exact opposite, and thank you for bringing that up. That's the exact opposite of school choice. I'm going to move to a totally different school district so my kid can go to a different school or a better school is the opposite of school choice. I mean, it's I'm going to have to move across these arbitrary boundaries, and I thought that was just the most awkward thing for Hillary to highlight in her campaign.
Wait.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. No, it's school choice for rich people, Leon.
Exactly.
It's just not school choice for the normal people who can't just pick up and move to their beach cottage in the Hamptons. So let's be very clear here. For Hillary, that's a perfectly good school choice. It's just for the little people that there is no choice involved. So I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No, but I mean, I think that's a great opportunity for somebody like Jeb or whoever it is on the GOP side to say, look, if this woman lived in America where I was in charge and I had my way, she wouldn't have to move across this arbitrary line and buy a more expensive house to get her daughter into a better school. She could spend her money with the voucher that I would provide her to get her into this better school, and I would provide competition for the school that she's in.
Right. And hopefully when Bobby Jindal is the nominee, he will make that perfectly clear.
Well,
he's done a great job in Louisiana on that point, and would be able to pummel it. So once he's the nominee, we're in great shape.
Yes, well, from your mouth to God's ear. Let me stay with you, Scott. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Rubio's tax plan.
Okay.
A lot of people have really kind of hammered Rubio's tax plan for kind of, as far as I can tell, what the issue is that he is expanding the middle class tax credits, whereas most of the people who get these credits don't actually pay taxes. They're actually receiving them as more or less cash from the federal government. And the criticism is he's not cutting taxes on, I guess, the top income brackets and things like capital gains tax and so on and so forth. And he's not extending the George W. Bush tax cuts at least as much. And I guess I'm going to ask you a compound question like I asked Jeff earlier. Is this good politics to kind of play to the middle at the expense of the higher income? And even if it's not good politics, is it good policy? I mean, how would you say that Rubio's first week has gone as a candidate?
Well, so let me start with the tax plan, because I think his first week has been okay, but going straight to the tax plan that he co-sponsored with Mike Lee in the Senate. I think there's a little misperception. The vast majority of the kind of hardcore fiscal conservative libertarians and conservatives on the right have people like Dan Mitchell and Vero DeRuggi and others have broadly applauded the Rubio-Lee tax plan, particularly the way that it treats savings and investment at the personal level and all the different things it does at the corporate level. The only things they have criticized, and I am with them 100%, is that the marginal rates for higher earners are way too high, that the threshold for being rich is way too low, and then, as you mentioned, the child tax credit, which is actually non-refundable. So it's not. It has to go against either payroll taxes or income taxes. It's not a just straight up welfare payment like the EITC. However, if you look at the scoring from the Tax Foundation on the plan, it costs about $180 billion, produces zero economic growth. So these supply side fiscal conservatives say, look, look, if you're going to spend, or if you're going to take $180 billion, let's get some growth out of it. And tax credits are notoriously horrible in terms of generating any sort of long-term economic benefits. They are basically a subsidy for the people receiving them. And that gets to the politics. So on policy, look, I think overall everybody says Rubio Lee is good, but there are a couple things they'd like to change. That has been, I think, distorted by a few misguided or disingenuous folks out there. That said, on politics, I'm not sold that this is a great political play, and in particular the child tax credit. And that is because, first of all, we have a record number of single people out there who wouldn't benefit from this. You also have the supply side economic things I mentioned. But beyond that, the GOP has an image issue, and the image issue is not with families. It is with everybody else. And a tax plan that gets derided as subsidizing breeders, whether you like that phrasing or not, it's really what it is. In fact, some of the reform conservatives who support this child tax credit have said they specifically want it to induce demographic change. In other words, they want people to make more babies.
All right, thank you, Scott.
No, that's...
Ash, you're a cat person. Can you follow up on this?
No. I'm just
as a cat person. Does it make you more likely to oppose Rubio?
No, wait a second.
Because he's
listen to me. Listen to what I said.
So pro-breeder.
Listen to what I said. What I said was that's how people are going to criticize the plan, not what I'm calling it.
Guys, the cat person vote is like 90 to 10%. In the Democrats' favor.
Are you accusing Ashe of being a crazy cat?
I think thank you for actually totally distorting what I just said. What I said is that would be the criticism of the plan, not the actual plan. But the reality is,
but the criticism of the plan is the more important thing, right? I mean, in political terms, nobody gives a crap that the tax is excluding of single people. People don't care about that. People don't even understand that at a political level, I think, until they actually go and do their taxes and they find out, they don't get the credit. What they want to hear is that somebody cares about me and is trying to do something.
Right, and you don't think that the left and the media are going to play this as social engineering, given that the people who created the plan say they wanted to induce childbearing.
They would have blowback from that. They would have blowback from that.
The guys who created the plan, Robert Stein, has openly admitted he wanted to induce additional childbearing. I'm not making this up. Do you think that the Democrats would not play that? Do you think they wouldn't?
I don't think they can, because look, the way that the number of things that they favor in the tax code, that's just not a club they're willing to pick up.
I
really don't think so.
Here's the other thing about Scott. Is it really going to help? Is it really going to help Hillary Clinton, whose entire candidacy cannot just be about winning the single mom's vote? It's to win the suburban mom's vote, because she's the standard bearer for women in this election. Do you think she's really going to tell soccer moms? So do you think they're going to use an attack against motherhood writ large and say, hey, this just helps out breeders?
Yeah.
Do you see that being an effective political tool this time around?
Let me give you a fantastic alternative policy that avoids all of these issues, and that is just cut the freaking payroll tax and lower regulatory costs that help families. If you want to help families via a free market way that doesn't isolate them. If you do the child tax credit, then you're just subsidizing babies. That's how it's going to come off. Hey,
the obvious response to all this is the flat tax.
There are two ways to go to breaking the welfare state. You can either say, let's cut Medicaid, Medicare, and welfare, and we've been saying that guff for decades, and it hasn't worked. Or you can actually work to reestablish family as the building block of society.
So what you can do,
help incentivize people to not sign up for the welfare state to begin with.
So you can paper over.
And I see the Rubio Lee plan as kind of a transition point to try to strengthen the actual building blocks of society that will enable us one day to embrace a more libertarian place. And I think going full libertarianism right now didn't seem to work for Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. I don't see a political advantage to Democrats.
Okay.
Mitt Romney was a classic libertarian candidate, by the way.
Totally
libertarian
he was
candidate.
perceived.
Let
The way
me interject here.
Libertarian.
No, I wasn't saying
Reason
that.
Magazine had him on the cover.
You know what, Scott, I understand libertarians have problems with breeders because these children are just zero contributors and don't.
No, it's a hold on. No.
My child really agrees with that.
I understand that libertarians have to work on converting people because you guys don't have your own children.
Let's all notch here because I think we'd like to talk about anything else at this stage.
We've had a 10-minute yelling match.
It's been the Bill McMorris and Scott Lincicome show here on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco.
No, I think it's a good discussion.
Yeah, people don't want to see that.
I'm going to send Bill a picture.
I'm just trying to add my voice because everyone else is talking.
Yes. God.
Hold on.
Loud noises!
Let me say something here. And I think that, look, I think it's unfair to say that libertarians don't recognize that a certain level of population growth is necessary for the functioning of a healthy economy. I mean, that is an absolute fact. I mean, it's not something I think about which reasonable people who are economically minded disagree. That having been said, we've moved on. We've had a 10-minute yelling match over a rather esoteric point of tax policy. So I want to close with one final substantive question, then we're going to get to lightning round. Neal Dewing, as the non-participant in the yelling match, gets the final question. Chris Christie said this week two things. He came out with his Social Security plan. He says, look, Social Security's got to have two major reforms. Number one, it's got to be means tested. Number two, the retirement age must be raised. And I think that, I guess my first question is, look, is Christie ever going to get off the mat to the extent that, you know, his proposals are going to matter and going to make a meaningful contribution to the debate? I mean, as we get into debate season, is Christie going to become a player again so that we have to care about what Christie says? And if so, I mean, look, I have to give the guy all the credit. I've been saying all these years, somebody is going to have to come along and say the retirement age has got to be raised. I mean, when Social Security was enacted, average American lifespan was something like the mid-50s. It's now the mid-70s. This is the major structural problem with Social Security, and somebody is going to have to address it. Is Christie going to get off the mat so that we have to take him seriously? And if so, I mean, are we going to ever see either of these reforms, either means testing or raising the retirement age? Are they ever going to be enacted in our lifetimes?
Sorry, I got to jump in on this one because I lived in New Jersey.
Please.
As far as Chris Christie goes, it honestly, because of his brashness, I think that can carry him, that his policies matter less than the way that he sells them, because it might not matter to, like, middle America, but people like my dad, who lived in New Jersey, love Chris Christie and his, you know what, this is how it is, this is how it's going to be. I'm sorry that it's not, you know, packaged the way that you like to hear it. It's not a nice way to say it, but this is reality, and there are people that actually react to that. So I think his policies actually matter less than how he decides to sell them. And if he goes trying to sell them like everyone else does in this nice, no, we're trying to help people way, that probably won't work for him. But if he goes out and says, look, I'm sorry, we're going to go bankrupt if we don't do this stuff, got to do it.
Well, I'll just add to that. I think a year ago I would have said that Christie would be a factor. But at this stage, I don't think so. I think that his profile has just steadily diminished. Other people have come up to sort of I guess, steal his thunder. I think you've got some people in this race who may be able to speak plainly and make some of the same cases that Christie could make. I mean, he's welcome to get in the race. I'm sure he would add a little bit of flavor to it, but I don't think that he's going to play outside of the Northeast. So no. And as to the Social Security question, I fully expect Social Security to just up and go bankrupt before I ever retire. I don't think there's any fix for it, and I don't have any hope for it. at all, and so I am stockpiling gold coins.
But it's no longer the program that it was. It's no longer an actual money that you put in trust, and they pay you the money that you put in trust. It's now a government welfare program, just like anything else, and so for that reason, it will indefinitely not go bankrupt.
Leon, it's never been that. It's always been I pay money to support the elder generation. It's always been a generational transfer program.
Well, it was that. Listen, there used to be a separate thing, a meaningful thing, the Social Security Trust. It doesn't exist anymore. It is solely an accounting gimmick, and now it is just basically another line item on the general appropriations. Jeff, you had one 10-second comment you were going to make, and then we got to do a lightning round.
Sure. One quick thing about Chris Christie. I agree. He's not going anywhere. In fact, I even said earlier today somebody ought to just tell him it's over. But I remember how the GOP kept searching, the base kept searching for somebody with excitement when they got bored of the frontrunner in 2012. Frontrunner this time might be Jeb, might be Rubio, might be Walker. Christie still has a niche there to make some trouble, make some waves, because he will be entertaining, if nothing else. He may just stick in the race to do that, and I think he could have an effect in that case.
All right, lightning round. Let's close with the substantive discussion. Let's imagine that you, as a candidate, were to travel across the country from New York to Iowa or whatever other comparably long distance you were going to travel in a creepy conversion van, creepy windowless conversion van that was bulletproof, with only you and someone as socially unfriendly as Uma Abedin as your traveling companion. What 3 items would you have with you in this creepy campaign van as you traveled? Scott Lincicome.
Pretty straightforward, I think. Candy, ether, and restraints.
I'm glad somebody went there right off the bat so we can ease the tension in the room off of that. Neal, what 3 items are you going to bring with you in your creepy campaign conversion van?
A .38 caliber revolver and 2 bullets.
How long could we stay on Neal's face right now?
I mean, if I'm going to be stuck in a van with Uma Abedin or whoever she is.
All right, Jeff. What 3 items are you going to bring with you in your campaign conversion van?
I think I might go Hunter S. Thompson style. I'd bring a canister of nitrous oxide. I'd bring a canister of ether, and I'd bring a whole bunch of marijuana. That'd be how I'd have to roll.
All right,
if I could smuggle a 4th, I'd take some more vodka and bourbon with me too.
Jeff doesn't have any intention on actually winning this campaign. Bill McMorris.
You'd be a fool to vote for me.
Well, I think we have to realize when you're driving the van is that these are events now. The Dark Knight rising again for the first time in front of a prayer needs him to be its deceiver, its good, its White Knight. Dark Knight, White Knight, Harvey Knight.
All right, Ash, what 3 items are you bringing with you in your creepy campaign van?
Well, I was going to bring marijuana too, and Diet Pepsi, and maybe like a really, really small taser that nobody could see just to get through the crowds.
You realize the tasers only have 1 cartridge in there.
It get me through 1 person. The rest will fall after that. They'll just kind of get scared and run away. You
make
don't
an
need
example of someone.
exactly. That's all you need.
Just bring Nellie's tour bus. You get meth, weed, you get it all. Right there.
Although I could probably just bring a cat and that would clear people out.
All right, guys. We're going to close up. We've actually run a little bit over time. We want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank my regular panelists for being here. Scott Lincicome of the Cato Institute, thank you for your time as always. Neal Dewey of the Federalist, Jeff Blehar of the Ashe Schow Decision Desk, F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon. Thank you guys for your time as always and for your absolutely free, we give you no money at all contributions to the show. Thank you so much. And also for our guest host, Ashe Schow of the Washington Examiner, thank you very much for taking time out of your Thursday evening and being with us. And we thank you, the audience, for joining us every week. And we hope that you'll be back this next week. Until that time, hold on. Let me also thank Aaron Gardner, our producer, who was with us and was responsible for us starting mostly on time, as we do when he is always here. Thank you, Aaron, for being with us as well. Thank you very much. This has been the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. We'll be back next week. Thank you.